We do offer solutions on the David Toulis program, and what we really offer is the method of thought, the habit of thought that lets you, my listeners, see local solutions to national problems that have imposed themselves on us here in Chattanooga and Hamilton County and places nearby, and also from Nashville. These are corrupt dogmas. These are falsehoods. These are abuses of law and customs that are often called public policy. And here in the Chattanooga area, in East Ridge, and in Soddy Daisy, in Red Bank, in Chattanooga and Hamilton County, and places beyond, we suffer from these impositions. And I think we don't realize that we do. We don't realize that we are being held back by these structures that are there. They're so familiar that we don't even think about them, and we don't even see them. We see them sometimes in the operation, say, of a city government, the East Ridge Planning Authority, for example, Housing Authority, for example, sending 2,500 letters out to homeowners suggesting that they might be thrown off their lots. We see it sometimes there, and there is right now in East Ridge an uproar over a district with a map that Dick Cook has published at East Ridge News Online that shows how many houses might be considered dilapidated. We see this problem, these structures in other instances as well. We'll see them this afternoon in East Ridge, again, East Ridge, in the city court there, overseen by Attorney Chris Helton as the city judge, the municipal corporation judge. And the charges against a man named Omariel Woods, a working man at Volkswagen, who travels about in a car freely and never had a license, and yet he was charged in a tag light offense case, charged with driving without a license. I think that's called a failure to exhibit statute. However, whichever statute under which he was charged in his case, it's not routine. And the fact that it's not routine and that it is shocking that a man like that would be charged for traveling in a car privately as if he were involved in transportation, that is a grief. Now, there are other people who are considering this problem, and you, my listener, are leading them all, because you've heard about this at least once from me. As an operation of state today, the operation of the modern progressive welfare, surveillance, and police military state that has its proofs everywhere in Chattanooga, and that the proof of its existing is the fact that people consider it and don't see it. Okay, there we have its success story. It is a success story beyond bounds, beyond imagination, that the modern welfare, progressive warfare state, the modern police state, is not even noticed. And very few people resist it. We have comments on our Facebook page, on the David Toulis Show. We are live on Facebook, by the way, at Nooga Radio, of people who are just startled that I would raise a question about a lost liberty, which legal historian Roger Roos calls just that, a lost right, the lost liberty of the right of movement. And what I try to do is give you, my listener, a fresh view and a sense of how we can bring about a reform. Reform is necessary in Hamilton County in many areas. And whenever there is an abrupt and startling use of state power, we can see the need for reform. And I'm not talking just about passing a bill in the General Assembly. It's not that simple, because the issues that we look at here are structural, and they're invisible. They're invisible to even the best in the General Assembly. And they are blown off as matters of administrative indifference by Governor Haslam. And the Tennessee Supreme Court and the Tennessee Criminal Court of Appeals are agreed that these are not issues at all. These are settled matters, and there's public policy in place to control movement. And we control it, and our people control it. And that is in spite of the law. It's in spite of the law in Tennessee. These claims are made. And as I'm your host here, David Toulis, I do thank you for giving me just a couple minutes of your time. We're trying to figure out what to do. And the answers to these problems are not getting a bill passed, not getting someone voted into the legislature in the election who will carry our banner of liberty. It doesn't work like that. And changes cannot be brought about top down. They will not happen top down, whether it's the abuse of the term blight in the Tennessee Code or or other. There are ways of dealing with these systemic and structural problems that are oppressive. There are ways of dealing with them locally, and that is the message of the Christian gospel. I'd like you to know that the idea of Christianity is always toward prosperity and always toward lenity and grace and freedom and the freeing of the slave. In the old republic, in the old Hebrew republic, runaway slaves were welcomed. There were no slave catchers who would come into Israel to capture them. Once they were there, they were free under the law, as free as any DNA Jew, so-called. They're called Jews nowadays, but as any DNA Israelite in that time. They were as free and deserving of protection of the law and the court as any native son, any son of one of the 12 patriarchs. And how is that? Well, that is because God cares about liberty and justice, and he wants there to be liberty and justice for all, on the earth and in time and space and in cities and counties, because he wants these to be proofs of individual salvation, right? God works upon the individual, one soul at a time, redeeming the unworthy, redeeming his enemies, saving his enemies from their sins. And like St. Paul, his most vile enemy, the most hateful enemy among men against him, converted by the appearance of the Lord Jesus on the Damascus road. But we're all his enemies, typified by the worst of them, St. Paul, at one time. And so we've been saved from our sins individually. And so the requirement of the gospel is that individual salvation, that freedom from the servitude to sin, is spread abroad in the instrumentalities, in the society, in the culture, in the universities, in the hospitals, in the courts and administration of government, in the economy, in the banking sector, in the invention sector. Everywhere there is this freedom, which of course is prosperity and happiness and delight. That is the story of mankind, the increase of that liberty through time, thanks to the Lord Jesus, thanks to the children of Israel of old, all showing the way toward a great and wonderful future, which we have ahead of us. Right, we have that ahead of us, despite the Baptist Church, which says that we are at the very end, and that things are getting worse and worse, and that crime is rising, and no telling how many false stories we are getting from the evangelical American church about how bad things really are. But they're getting better, and we are looking here in Chattanooga how we can make them better ourselves, and do it in the spirit of Christian charity and mercy. That was the message this past Saturday and Sunday at a missions conference at North Shore Fellowship that I attended only a small part of. That there are things here. Missions are local, right? That was the theme. And indeed, it's true. And here now, we want to look at East Ridge at 2 points. East Ridge, Tennessee. And this is David Toulis. We are arguing for local economy here, live on Facebook at Nooga Radio, live on TuneIn Radio app on your phone. You can hear us anywhere in the world. You can hear your favorite show. David Toulis here for just a few minutes. That's all I need you for 2 or 3 minutes. And also, of course, live on YouTube. I suggest you love your neighbor and buy local. That near is better than far, small than big, and simple than complex, personal than corporate. Here we are in the footnotes now, 5-point type. And that physical is better than abstract. We're brought to you by yournews.com, yournews.com. And there's a story there about a man named Omariel Woods. Omariel Woods works as a man in the Volkswagen plant. He had some time in Silverdale, he tells me, and he has, from his delightful vacation at Silverdale, a $14,000 tab. That's what he told me when I met him last week. And it was last Tuesday in East Ridge City Hall. He thought he had a court date, then he was mistaken. But in God's providence, we had a chance to chat about his problems. And that was the story he told me. He's being charged with driving unrevoked. And if you go to yournews.com, you can see the local solutions, a loco-centric solution, which does not require us to budge a single idea of any member of the black robed regiment in the Supreme Court in Nashville, those lawyers, nor the black robed regiment in the Court of Appeals, the Criminal Court of Appeals in Knoxville, where criminal court cases go and appeal first there before ending up in Nashville. Nothing has to be done among any of their ideas, and we can still bring about a reform in the Chattanooga area and in East Ridge. And the reform is lococentric.
You can post your job to 100 plus job sites.
And that is a lococentric solution. And that is how Christianity operates. It always operates from the ground up. It's not a top-down system of thought. If it's called a religion, which it's not, but I'll use that term in pencil. It's not a religion that's top-down. It is a religion, if you will, a worship of God that's bottom-up. It starts in the hinterlands among the common people, among the tradesmen, the working people, the ignorant, the farm workers, the people who are open to simple messages because they themselves are very simple, and their lives are torn up by their sinful conditions and the poverty of spirit and the poverty of means that often brings. A bottom-up reform, and we're using the law itself. We're using not God's law here necessarily, but we are using the Tennessee Code annotated and the proper understanding of it. And that's why, in a way, I have used my friend, my listener, and I thank you for it. But I'm afraid that there are people in officialdom who are wary of me. They don't like my microphone. They don't like the fact that I'm standing up for people and I'm citing the law. That's what I do as best I can, is to use the law as it's written, and the body, what's called case law, the body of court cases, even cases that argue against my position. Okay, even they, as I make note in my transportation administrative notice, even they admit the distinction that is important for liberty for you and for your children and for Mariel Woods, the working man, who was first stopped by the finest of East Ridge's men in blue for a tag light that was out. That's the tag light is where you see that a great deal. The tag light is the pretext stop in a transportation stop under Title 55, the Tennessee Transportation Code. And the problem that the state has is I think O'Mariel Woods and people like him should point out in city court. The problem that the state has with Neil Pinkston bringing up the charges when they come before when the case gets out of city court and into the real court, the charges have a problem, and that is that they are from the transportation statute, but aimed upon people who are not involved in transportation. Right? If they are said to be involved in transportation, it is a rebuttable presumption. And so what has to happen, if you go to yournews.com and read the story, what has to happen is that there has to be a rebuttal of the presumption. And that's done by affidavit. And the affidavit, which is not supplied there at yournews.com, the affidavit simply says, I'm a private user of the road. I use my car to go to work, comma, to go shopping, comma, to go to church, comma, to visit my parents, comma, to travel on vacation, comma, to run errands and for other private purposes, period. New paragraph, it would go on to say something like, I'm made in God's image. I'm an individual. I'm a private person, a private party, Homo sapiens, comma, of the male sex, comma, and I exercise my rights given by God, comma, recognized by the Constitution, comma, unalienable and inherent in me, period. New paragraph, further affiant saith not. That's the affidavit. And what you're doing is you're identifying yourself as a human being, and that you're using your car or truck, your motorcycle for private purposes, not in transportation. And thereby, you're not subject to Title 55. And now I know people are, when they hear of this analysis, their eyes get big, and suddenly they rush to the defense of the state, and they say, well, how can we have police then? How can we have the sheriff's department? How can we have radar stops? How can we have speed traps? How can we have all these good and necessary things that keep us safe? You mean to say that people aren't bound by speed postings and the like? Well, yes. In fact, and the law is built this way. The law is built this way, and what it has done by practice and by years of neglect among the people who don't care about their rights and are willing to have themselves regulated. What has happened is that everything has been transformed. All travel has been transformed into transportation by practice. And you say, man, that's so much hair splitting, David. Why do you do that? Why do you make these fine points? Well, I make these fine points because they have their neglect has an evil consequence, and the evil consequence you can read every day at, I would go to chattanoogan.com, John Wilson's website. You can also go to East Ridge News Online, that run by Dick Cook, the former TFP reporter. who won a high note for his reporting work. You can see there the arrest reports and the people who are charged. Many people. 1 in 5 people, I would say generally, are charged under the traffic statute and shouldn't be there. They should not have been arrested. They should not have been charged, especially when the offense is purely traffic, like driving on revoked, rescinded, or none, or registration charge, or violation of financial responsibility statute. Those are the 3 legs of commercial government. And it is under those 3 legs that many people are charged, men and women. And they're the commonest sort of people. They're not employees, and they're not involved in transportation. Do you know that the Tennessee forfeiture statute, the civil asset forfeiture statute, does not apply to people in commerce? Did you know that? Why is that? It does not apply to operators and chauffeurs and drivers who are in the for-profit use of the public roads. It only applies to private people like you, only to private people like you. Private travelers only and alone are subject to having their car stolen by the state highwayman program. But I'll have you know that Mike Carter, Representative Mike Carter, and Senator Todd Gardenhire rightly and courageously and truly got passed in the General Assembly this session a major reform of that evil highwayman program, the policing for profit program. And they should be commended. For their other sins, maybe excoriated, but for this, they should be highly praised. And they have done a good deed, though the program has not been abolished. And it hasn't been abolished, and it's on the books in a form because of the commitment of the state to the drug war, so-called, the drug war that has filled the American prison system with more people per capita than anyone in the Soviet Union ever faced. You face more chance of going to prison in America than you did in the deepest part of the Red Star state, the Soviet Union with its Gulag archipelago. More chance of going to jail here than under a totalitarian system. And yet we say we're a free people. we are so amazingly deluded. So here now, let me just nail down for you, just in a nutshell, the defense that O'Mariel Woods needs to make. You can find it at yournews.com. Yournews.com. It's at the bottom of the sweeping national page, our sweeping in global and political news page, and at the bottom is the local material out of Chattanooga, and today out of East Ridge. So there are 2 things about East Ridge we want to talk about today, and that is the Blight statute, which is being evoked in East Ridge about blight and dilapidation. I defend those, by the way. I defend blight and I defend dilapidation because they're part of the human condition, and they cry for market processes that by law and by taxation and by financial burden imposed by cities and counties and governments, properties that can't be properly developed because the disincentive of state control, which pre-exists the ownership of any particular person or business of a piece of property said to be dilapidated. Now, O'Mariel Woods needs to do several things. He needs to have an affidavit that states he's a private user. He also needs to cite transportation administrative notice. And I have a copy here. I'm holding it up for our viewer on YouTube. It's 20 pages, and it's called Administrative Notice. The first page is table of contents, and the second page is the actual beginning of the review of law in Tennessee. You can download it. It prints out at 20 pages. There's a downloadable version today. You can get a copy of it today at yournews.com, and it's at the O'Mariel Woods story on that page. And, O'Mariel Woods is, I'm not sure I can help him, but the point I want to make is that I'm trying to generalize the help, right? Generalize the help. If not him taking advantage of me, which I want him to do, then perhaps another. And the parties I'm caring most about are the poor, the alien, the minority, the orphan, and the widow. God cares about those people first. He cares about them first. If you're an alien here, like Rudy Soto Rodriguez, who has a Hamilton County case coming up May 1st, then God cares about those people first. They are at a disadvantage, and the law is, in fact, in their favor. And we just have to make it happen in their favor. And so praying people should pray for people like me, and praying people should take part in this matter. This is local-centric redevelopment. This is economic redevelopment. This is liberty. redevelopment. And then also, O'Mariel needs to point out several things. He needs to cite administrative notice, and that he is he is not operating a car. He's using his car pursuant to the law as described therein. And then he has to do the third point, which is the real bloodletting for the state government. And that is the David Perkey's testimony in the case out of Nashville in federal district court about the abuse of the revocation system. And David Perkey admits that people who had their driver's licenses revoked for non-payment of court debt and court fines and jail fines and fees, they got their licenses without their having actually applied for them. How is that? How is that?
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga